Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Wednesday, December 13th, 2023. Coming to the end of the year, rapidly approaching. I am not prepared. I'm not prepared for the end of the year. I'm not prepared for end of holidays. I'm not prepared. I'm not prepared for today's show. I'm not prepared for anything. And yet, we have College Boy 2, number 2 home, and number home. As well, whatever that might mean. And, we got to spend this break talking about how important it is to be prepared. So I'm going to have to bring somebody in who is prepared. And I guess we can bring Greg Dworkin in for that. But I don't know if we can get Greg here to impart lessons about preparedness, academic preparedness, and preparedness for college life. But we can take care of that. I went to college once. I know all about it. So anyway, that's what's on my mind today. It was a long day driving around Central Virginia with the extra syllable and everything, and back and forth all over the place. Let's see, we made a stop in Charlottesville. We made a stop elsewhere. We had visiting to do. We had college pickups to do. I don't want to disclose the secret location where we were picking up from college, although, I don't think it's a big secret, but it was in Charlottesville, if you thought you got me on that one. No, we were just visiting in Charlottesville. It was just a long day out there, and I needed to get an early start, and that meant we couldn't do the show live yesterday, but I felt like I had to drop some stories on you in pre-recorded form, just to keep up to speed with things. I know the election is still a long way away, but preparedness for that one I'm very much into. And actually, in preparing for yesterday's show and in finishing up Monday's show, I don't know what exactly what we were doing, but viewing the social medias and just giving some thought to the weird proceedings in court for the fascist guy, now that he's stuck in court in 4 different locations and making various stupid pleadings. The very interesting move on Jack Smith's part to try and leapfrog the appeals court and go directly to the Supreme Court, getting a lot of attention today as well. More writing about it that we didn't get to share yesterday. Not that we had time for it yesterday, but that very much on my mind, and just sort of thinking about the idea as other academics now begin to chime in and say things like, for instance, whether it's the 14th Amendment cases or these prosecutions where Trump is essentially arguing he's immune forever because he once claims to have won the presidency, how damaging that could be. And the idea that's, taking root among his defenders that, isn't it really better to let the people decide and let why should the courts intervene? Why should we build Article 3 courts and maintain them in order to address the interpretations of the law when we could just let voters do it? But of course, voters did do it in 2020. If you're a believer in that, I'm not really a big believer in being able to distill out of elections the sort of decision-making that courts make, precision decision-making, pinpointing exactly why, what was the question, how does it turn, and what must the jury consider in order to reach a realistic and useful conclusion, as opposed to, everybody just throw a bunch of spaghetti at the wall and we'll see what sticks. And whoever wins, I guess we just immunize them forever. But by the way, the move by Jack Smith the move by Jack Smith only comes because Donald Trump, who was once president and seeks to become president again, alleges that he fully believes that the office of the presidency is omnipotent and immune from all prosecution before, during, and after your term in office. And as we discussed yesterday, an extraordinarily dangerous idea, to be sure. But I don't know. Between that and the idea that the 14th Amendment too should be left to the voters. If there's anything to that idea, well, then I don't know why we don't just say, well, the 2020 voters disqualified him from the 2024 ballot. I mean, you might think, and I'm sure that people would object, well, during the 2020 balloting, we didn't know that he was going to launch an insurrection, attacking the Capitol and trying to overthrow the government of the United States to keep himself in power. The rest of the government that was working to transition power peacefully, he was going to undo and overthrow. But I'm reminded that we did have a very good idea that he was going to do that. I mean, I guess we didn't have the proof, the evidence that he was really going to go through with it versus the widespread speculation that he was going to do something like that. But I did take a look back at how far in advance of the election were people actually talking about the likelihood of this kind of activity. And I don't know if anybody knew exactly to what extent or with great specificity exactly what they would be doing. For instance, I never saw anybody write, well, in about 3 months' time, people are going to be breaking into the Capitol and smearing feces on the wall. No one predicted that. But in case you were wondering, yes, there very definitely were predictions of violent activity on January 6th, among other dates that they pinpointed. But there was very clear-eyed and very clear warning and wargaming of, well, just what would the Trump forces be capable of? What might they try to do and how? And, I mean, I remember reading the wargaming articles, but I was curious about whether or not there was ever actually any discussion of a violent attack that would seek to disrupt proceedings, say, on January 6th. And there were. So you might say, we didn't know exactly the full extent of what was going to happen January 6th on November 9th, November 7th, was it? I don't even remember anymore. Election day 2020. But it was already in circulation, and it was a fact, or not a fact in evidence, but a speculation clearly in evidence. And I guess if you're going to say, well, we're going to let the people decide, we're going to decide it outside of a courtroom, which I think is a foolish idea. But if you're going to accept that as a premise, well, then the rules of evidence inside the courtroom don't apply. The rules of evidence have to be the rules of evidence. What factors are laid before the American people based on which they make their decision? How do they render their decision? Was this in discussion? It was. So I admit it into evidence, and I draw the conclusion that the people have decided. In 2020, they were handed an incumbent president who, in most instances, is easily handed re-election, and handed instead a resounding defeat. And so why we have to do this over again, and why we have to keep banning people from the presidency every 4 years, when we have a constitutional provision that clearly says people can be banned from office. Yes, we can fight about what an office is, although that's just stupid. Anyway, just wanted to set the table for all of that, just because I didn't have a second hour to do it yesterday. However, we do have an hour ahead of us, and Greg Dworkin is here for it, and we're here for him. Good morning, Greg. How are you?
I'm good.
Well, good.
It's a question of how much detail you feel like you need to determine something.
True.
And that's
right.
where, courts perhaps are different than the courts of public opinion.
Yes.
For example.
That's the idea. Right.
You were going over all the things we sort of had an idea about before the insurrection, that it wasn't a complete and total surprise, even though it was, it was shocking but not surprising.
Yes. Right. I think that's the way we would put it.
But Trump had been asked in detail on multiple occasions.
Yeah.
And part of the inability of the media to take him both literally and seriously,
right,
whether or not you would accept the results of the election if you lost.
Yeah, that was asked in 2016.
It was asked forever, and he never said yes.
Yeah.
Never.
And he's also doing that now, and everybody's still like, well, geez, I don't know.
Well, that's just locker room talk.
Yeah, right.
So that's part of the problem. And this goes along with a whole theory about why polling looks the way it does at the moment.
Oh.
Part of the reason is Trump is out of the news. Nothing he says is new. They don't cover it. People don't hear it, and they don't really believe it. And that's why campaigns, matter, because you take something that really matters, be it the sad Texas abortion story, or whether it's Trump's insurrection tendencies, dictatorial desires, whatever you want to call it now. and you make them a focus front and center. You pay for advertising. You basically make people see it. And you repeat it and you repeat it because that's how adults learn, by repetition. Let me say that again. Adults learn by repetition. So if you wind up doing that as a campaign, you can have some impact on what goes on. That's why convictions matter more than indictments.
Yes. Well, they carry a lot more penalties anyway.
Well, to the person, it matters.
Yeah,
in
right.
that sense.
We'll tell you when it
to
happens.
The public, they don't care about the dollar amounts associated with the fact that, yes, he was convicted of fraud. They care about the fact that he was convicted of fraud. It's not just an accusation.
Yeah.
Whether it's a criminal conviction, that'll make even more of a difference.
Yeah, sometimes. But people.
Simon Rosenberg makes a point of this. That's what all the polls say.
Okay.
Yeah, it looks basically tied. But, if Trump is actually convicted, well, he's going to lose 10 points.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, maybe he loses 3. But 3's enough if you're tied.
Yes, that's true. Anything is if you're tied.
Yeah. So, there's all of that. So I think what happens in the courts really does matter a lot. And, in fact, today's theme for the Pundit Roundup, today's theme for my part of the show.
Okay.
Election news is court news and vice versa.
Ta-da. Okay.
Because it all matters. So which state do you want to start with, New York or Michigan?
New York.
Okay.
I don't know. Sure.
So you may remember, New York is like weird. They have an awful Democratic Party. They just have terrible management.
Yes, they are very weird about that.
All right. I mean, they decided that there was going to be a breakaway Democrat group they were going to support who would work with Republicans, and that's how Andrew Cuomo kept power as governor because the regular Democrats didn't like him, but he made deals with the Republicans to keep himself in power. Little mini Netanyahu there. So that's the basis for it, and it's cost a lot of Democratic seats. They did relatively poorly in the congressional election in 2022. They lost seats they could have won, including George Santos, and it cost them control of the House. So Kathy Hochul, who's the government, she's the governor, and a Democrat, had an opening on the state Supreme Court, and she wanted to put a conservative in. And the Democratic Party actually got their act together. That's a clean way of saying it, right? And they protested, and they got themselves a decent liberal appointment. Well, that mattered because yesterday the court decided on a 4-3 basis that the Democrats could have another bite at the apple, and they could redo districts. Now, there's some hurdles to jump over before they get to that point, but if they are, in the end, allowed to do that, then that may mean anywhere between 4 to 6 seats for the Democrats.
All right.
Because of gerrymandering, which would more than wipe out what Republicans are doing in North Carolina.
Okay.
The other way. Now, you can say, hey, gerrymandering isn't good government no matter which party does it.
I could. I don't feel like
that may be true, but you can't unilaterally disarm.
Right.
And so if Republicans are doing it, Democrats are going to have to do it, and they need to do it in places like Illinois and California and New York to offset it until the Republicans stop doing it.
Yes. Republicans frequently
and if that's the case,
think we're doing
that may be the difference between a toss-up House and a Democratic House. Some people, Logan Phillips from Race to the White House, are already saying this ruling makes Democrats the favorite.
Hey, okay. I
mean, the ruling alone, just because of the number of seats that are in play here, it matters. So Congress matters. Well, courts matter.
That's true. I think courts are important. People don't realize this.
So pay attention to who and how people get on the court. In New York, there's a complicated system. Basically, it's the governor, but also there's a group of recommendations that are made by a commission or something along those lines. That's how some states do it. Some states it's elected. Some states it's just the governor.
Some states
it all
Santa
matters.
puts
Local
them
matters,
in the governor's stocking.
Yeah, so you got to pay attention to all of that. There
are a lot of different methods. Okay, and New York loves weird methodology. It does.
Basically, what they try to do is just shield these decisions from the voters.
Stupid idiots. What you guys can't decide
we'll
anything.
Just make you jump through all these hoops, and we'll just make sure the party bosses really, in the end, get to make the decision.
An excellent point, really. Just given how frequently we find, I don't know, it's not always Republican academics who do it, but the old, we don't know what to do, leave it to the voters. And then they just really just don't leave anything to voters anymore. They just don't. We've been through 100 different examples of Republican states. Well, if their legislatures don't like what they say, then they don't leave it to the voters.
We'll have a variant of that when we look at the Texas abortion case. Leave it to the doctors.
Texas, another state. Yeah, right, sure. And then they don't.
Except if the doctors don't do what we want, then you're in jail.
Yeah.
But, no pressure.
Right. Remember, the big government isn't going to get in between you and your doctor like they do with Obamacare.
Yeah.
We're going to do it for
Republicans.
It's God in between you and your doctor.
Of pushing. Well, there need to be exceptions. Yes, we're restricting abortion, but of course there are going to be common sense exceptions, which in the end we won't allow you to use, because if you try to do them, we'll put pressure on the people making those decisions to make sure they decide correctly.
Yeah, right. Be nice exception you got there. It'd be a shame if you used it.
Well, no, you can't, says Texas.
Yeah,
well, we'll go to court, and the judge says, yeah, you can. And Ken Paxton says, no, you can't. We're bringing it to the Supreme Court, which is loaded with anti-abortion, conservatives, and we'll show you. And, yeah, go ahead. All the doctor has to, you don't need these laws. All the doctor has to do is do what's right, and, we won't interfere, except if they do something we don't like, in which case we're going to say, all right, but now you're subject to penalty because we don't agree with you.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because we're medical experts now.
Yeah, yeah. And they, of course, they may even justify it themselves.
Leave it to the people. As long as you come up with the correct decision, we won't interfere with that slogan.
Right. Yeah. We're leaving it to doctors. And then the doctors that don't decide that, we pull their licenses and then say, they're not doctors. We're leaving it to doctors, we say.
Yeah, they're not doctors.
You're not a
doctor. Now they're not doctors anymore. We'll get new doctors who agree with
Easy. Right? Okay. Right.
Anyway,
well, it happens a lot.
So that's what happened in New York. And
New York.
In Michigan, a really interesting set of things happened. And this has to do with a lot of discussion that we were having about the 6 unindicted co-conspirators in the Jack Smith case.
Oh.
Remember, number 6 was not clear, still not clear. Everybody now thinks it's Boris Epstein. But for a while, I thought it was Mike Roman.
Right.
Turns out, good reason. In Detroit, you see.
Yeah. Oh, all right.
In Detroit, in Michigan.
All right, I think
in Lansing right now. The story's out of Lansing.
Real capital.
There's a group of Republican false electors who were in court because what they did, according to the state, was illegal. They claimed to be electors, and they really weren't, and they were cheating, and it's against the law.
Right. I mean, how would you like it if I claimed to be the judge in your case? You dummies?
Right. So there's other states that are doing that. Georgia, for example, and we know about that with Fani Willis. But here's the interesting news that came out yesterday.
All right.
This is from Craig Mauger and the Detroit News. Top advisors within Donald Trump's campaign were aware of concerns in early December 2020 that criminal charges could result from submitting certificates falsely claiming the Republican won battleground in states like Michigan that it actually lost.
Sure.
According to documents obtained by the Detroit News. The emails and text messages among campaign officials and volunteers showed supporters of Trump's bid to overturn the 2020 presidential election worked to ease worries about potential prosecution in Pennsylvania and New Mexico.
Don't worry.
Basically, they added a codicil.
Right.
That said, well, we're the electors, but only if the courts agree.
Yeah.
They didn't do that in Michigan, Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, and Wisconsin.
Well, those people the laboratories of the states. They have 2 good laboratories.
Now they sort of know that.
48 crappy ones. Okay.
Yeah. We sort of knew that already, but here's the new stuff we didn't know. The reason that we now know that they forcefully declined to act on the concerns, actively declined to act. It's not a passive thing. On the concerns in Michigan, Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, and Wisconsin is because we now have records from Kenneth Chesbrough, the lawyer who aided the Trump campaign.
All right.
Why? Because he was indicted in Georgia and he decided to turn state's evidence, and now he's cooperating in Arizona, Nevada, Michigan, and other places. So now they have records from him.
Evidence. Cool. Hey, I didn't even really think about how often you could. There are 50 different states you could turn into evidence in, or whatever. Is it turn states evidence? I thought it was this state.
And try to do something illegal. He certainly did in those 7.
Yeah.
So it was, according to the Detroit News, a group of Republicans in Pennsylvania, a state Democrat Joe Biden won in 2020 by 1 percentage point, who had hesitations about signing certificates falsely claiming to be Pennsylvania's official presidential electors.
Yeah,
they voiced their legal concerns during a December 12th, 2020 conference call that featured, you ready?
Yeah.
Rudy Giuliani,
Boo.
who, by the way, is in court right now, and Shay Moss is tearing him a new one about his lying.
Okay.
And he's already guilty. They have to decide how much he's going to pay, just like in New York.
You told us that one.
So Rudy Giuliani.
All right, I need a grogger. Go on.
And Mike Roman.
Mike Roman.
A Trump campaign official, according to emails about the conversation. So the liaison between the Trump campaign and Trump himself and these states trying to do something illegal were Rudy Giuliani and Mike Roman. That's interesting because they describe him as a Trump campaign official. And you may also recall that Jack Smith says there was a Trump campaign official who hasn't been previously identified, who isn't even one of the unindicted co-conspirators, that's doing all sorts of stuff. And we're putting this into one of the reasons that, we're making the case that Donald Trump is guilty of January 6th, trying to interfere with a official proceeding, and we want the Supreme Court to rule on whether or not he's immune. But Mike Roman's right in the middle of all of that. Now, and so he may well be a 7th unindicted co-conspirator, just not in the court.
Or Boris Epstein could be the 7th. We're still not sure?
We think it's Epstein because he certainly deserves it. Apparently Mike Roman deserves it too.
Okay, so it might shift because there was that weird.
Maybe they'll both award statues to both. Maybe they both get Oscars.
Right? Yeah, that can happen. The Academy is tied. There was a weird hitch to it that was like they were talking. They named every time they named an unindicted co-conspirator who was an attorney. They said they were an attorney. And then they didn't say it for unindicted co-conspirator number 6. Do I remember that correctly? And then we were like, well, it doesn't mean it can't be an attorney. So it's Boris Epstein, Stun, whatever. And now it may turn out to be, well, no, it was Mike Roman all along. And the reason they didn't say the guy was an attorney is it's Mike Roman, and he's not an attorney. Or is he?
He's a campaign official. But, he could be an attorney. Who knows?
He may have become an attorney over the past 6 weeks. Who knows? Okay, interesting. So that rumor is still alive, and he's definitely in trouble. He may be the unindicted co-conspirator, but he's definitely in trouble somewhere.
So Chesborough decided to write alternative language for the Pennsylvania and New Mexico electoral certificates, stipulating Republicans in those states weren't the official electors, but might later be determined to be.
Yeah. It's interesting that they granted that.
So Chesborough said, I get why they complained, and given the fact that these 2 states complained and we did this, he talks to Mike Roman and says, and I quote, a text message, Mike, I think the language at the start of the certificate should be changed in all the states.
Yes.
And Roman writes back, I don't.
And what's amazing there is if we're right about, is he an attorney, like, not only is Kenneth Chesborough an attorney, he thinks he's like, a hot crap.
Well, he was the Trump campaign director of Election Day operations.
Yeah, he's a big deal type attorney, and Mike Roman I guess what? I disagree with you about that one. And what would
but it gets better. So then Chesborough texts, I can help with drafting in just a couple of hours.
It's over.
Mike Roman writes back, F those guys.
So I think Mike Roman's not only not an attorney, but a bus driver, as it turns out, and saying, I want you to pave the road with these Republicans and their skulls. Yeah. I got to drive over them now. Yeah. Holy mackerel. Forget I can help with drafting. It's drafted. It's cut and paste this into every article because it doesn't make any difference. It won't hurt our case. It can only help protect our people. And Mike Roman said, F those people.
Right. The news reviewed hundreds of pages of emails and text messages Attorney General Dana Nessel's office obtained involving Chesborough. Wow. He participated in an interview with an agent in Nessel's office earlier this month, records show. The internal emails and text messages shine new light on the deep involvement of the Trump campaign in orchestrating the slates of false electors and behind-the-scenes deliberations. Trump's campaign didn't immediately respond Tuesday to a request for comment, but was overheard saying, F those guys.
Yeah, basically. That's really something. And now you can see why Chesborough might do something like flip and say, I tried to actually kind of toe the line, and I tried to keep everybody out of court on this, and no one would listen to me, and I'm the smart one and you're the dumb ones. On the other hand, I don't know how much protection that should afford you. Maybe might afford protection to the fake electors, but the plot to put them up, I'm not so sure you get help with that.
Right. So Chesborough later told Michigan investigators that the conference call was, quote, very heated, end quote, that he had with Mike Roman, but he wasn't sure why Roman messaged the F those guys. Chesborough said, well, why don't we just placate Pennsylvania?
Yeah.
And Chesborough added, look, I think they're worried about that Attorney General a-hole in Pennsylvania, who would be Josh Shapiro, who's now the governor.
Yeah.
And so that's why they wrote it for Pennsylvania, but they didn't write it for the other states. So
yeah, that's bizarre.
Yeah, court stuff affects elections, and election stuff affect courts. So, here's yet another example.
I guess so. Very weird. Why they wouldn't put that protection for everybody. And I guess they figured, well, I don't know. There's a Republican attorney general in some of these states, and I guess there always will be, so we'll never be in trouble. Although it is still a mystery why they did anything in New Mexico. No one was alleging that Trump had won New Mexico. So I'm really baffled as to how they even got
Yeah, that one's weird.
But they showed up and said, would you like some green chilies and fake electors? And I guess they said, yeah, sure. We'll take both. All right. We'll be right back. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We got more to talk about. We've discovered more to talk about.
Yeah, I have a personal point of privilege, a privilege motion, which is requiring a sufficient second that refers to the previous question here.
Right, overruled or something. That's
yes,
not really in use here.
This is what happens when you have amateurs try to do this. Mm-hmm. So the point here is, why did New Mexico?
Yeah, why?
Suggest that maybe we should try the false elector thing as well, so long as you give us protection.
Yeah,
and the answer
why
is that a lot of these news stories do not forcefully enough make the linkage and case that we're not talking about false electors. We're talking about the state Republican parties. These are all Republican operatives in
Big
their
time.
individual states. And it's the state party that's doing the dirty.
That's true.
In every single state. It's the state party. In fact, some of these electors are state officials. Some of them used to run the party. Some of them were running the parties.
Yes, that we definitely have to reinforce that. To get to be an elector in a state, fake or otherwise, really, when there's a question before the election, hey, we don't know who won the election yet, but when and if we figured out who wins, who do you want? Each campaign is asked. Who do you want to be your electors?
Let's just pick this guy with a great reputation for honesty in the community, or we could do the Republican Party chair.
Right, and it usually is in both cases local or statewide party people. You know, you're asking the state party and the campaign, who do you want? Well, you pick people who are prominent. It's a little reward to people you know aren't gonna do something weird like, I'm not going to vote for the guy I said I was going to vote for in the Electoral College. They're supposed to be loyal to the parties and the candidates in both cases. And it's odd that in so many instances they found people who were both loyal to Trump and perfectly willing to lie to the federal government. And now the mystery is, where do they come up with people who are so loyal to Trump that they say, I'll even pretend to be a fake elector in a state that Trump got clobbered in, that they're not even claiming to have won? Just voluntarily. Here's some signature. Hey, we're going to do it. Put us down for this. But protect us, like Pennsylvania. So it's like they went into it saying, we know we're walking into a minefield. We want Pennsylvania's protection. But also, we're not even in this war, but let's fight anyway.
So back in January of 2022, there's this article in a news source called Source NM, standing for New Mexico.
Ah, okay. Well, you know they're a good source because they're called Source.
Yeah.
They could be called good source, right?
So I can't, stipulate that they're a good source.
Not everybody in New Mexico wants protection up front, like the guy's naming this website.
It says 5 people behind fake election certificates likely broke New Mexico law, professor says. The 5 Republicans added a caveat they probably hoped would protect them, but it might not be enough. This was back in January 2022. 2 of them used to be high-ranking members of the state Republican Party. And then this paragraph, so far, the New Mexico Republican Party has refused to comment on the acts by its members. And the signers have been less than forthcoming.
And also interesting note there, right? They wanted and sought and got the Pennsylvania protection, but they're not sure, at least last year. That might not have done anything. Might be window dressing.
Might be. So, again, if you're trying for convictions, you pick the ones where you have the strongest case.
Yeah.
And the ones with the strongest case are the ones that didn't have those protections. The ones with the strongest case are the ones where you have a text message from the Trump campaign saying, F those guys.
That's now
the one
becomes...
you take to court.
Yeah, that's true. Although, again...
They didn't have them at the time, but they have them now.
Yeah, and just for fun, you throw in New Mexico. How interesting, though. Like, they bought the optional death and dismemberment package on this one and said, give us the Pennsylvania protections. Sure, why not? But you think they might be of no avail. Like at least the other 6 states, they could say, hey, we really thought we won this state.
Well, but again, let me make this personal point of privilege here.
All right.
They're not doing it because they had doubts about whether or not Trump won the state. They're doing it because they're Republicans.
Yes, so there's the point. And New Mexico just, I guess, has the most...
New Mexico also has Republicans.
Oh. Where have they been hiding them? That wasn't clear to me. But... yeah, I guess that's it. And I mean, I guess the point you're making here, and it's a good one, and now I'll come around to it too, is I guess Republicans just love criming so much that even when when the crime boss isn't saying, I want you to steal New Mexico, they say, we should steal New Mexico.
The crime boss was telling everybody in the Republican Party, rally behind me and save my losing campaign here.
That's true.
And they did it everywhere.
Yeah, but that's, I guess, it.
You know what that is? That's a RICO thing. You know who's dealing with that? Fonnie Willis.
Oh.
You know who she indicted for it? Ken Chesbro. You know who's testifying in all these states? Ken Chesbro.
F that guy. I mean, that's how I would text. Yeah. Right. I guess I don't know. It's very interesting to me that they were very targeted in which states they were asking for, but that there were because there's Republicans in every state, there was always a chance. You might not have believed it, but New Mexico proved that it was true, where people would say, I'm not being asked to crime, but I'd like to do some. Can I get in on this?
Too far in California and New York, but not New Mexico.
I guess so. That may be that the Republicans in those states did not know where the capitals were and didn't know to show up. But, yeah, basically, or it's very far away.
The other side of the coin that makes it really interesting, though, is you can't even look and say, well, it depends upon who the governor is. No, it really doesn't. Georgia had a Republican governor who didn't want to have any part of this, and they did it anyway.
That's true, right?
New Hampshire had a Republican governor. God knows what he thinks about anything. He's endorsing Nikki Haley. Who knows?
Right. My dad wants to go to a stamp convention. That's all I know about. Yeah, all right. Well, that's true that Republican places, they did not do that frequently.
There's
Georgia's
no
a bit of a
reason
mystery.
to it. But, my point simply is if you're a Republican, you're susceptible to this kind of pressure. Some people will buckle, others won't. But the others who won't are rare. The people who buckle are common. And that's why most of the Republicans lined up behind Trump in the first place.
They buckled to him. And now we'll see whether they buckle before the courts.
Well,
okay.
Yeah, so again, court business is
Unless they like to
election
buckle in
business,
prison.
and otherwise,
vice versa. Right. You told us right at the beginning. Okay. Good.
Anyway,
I think.
Garrett Haake made an interesting observation about the Texas senators, by the way.
Good for him. All right. Senators?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you see, you had this Kate Cox horrible abortion situation, and the person who is at the center of it, Kate Cox, is the one, who has to bear the brunt of all of this, of course.
Right.
But Texas being mean and cruel and simply saying, we don't really care about the life of the mother or anything else. In fact, we'll have our minions and trolls tell you the mother's life really wasn't in jeopardy because we're experts, because we're not doctors.
Right. They like soup.
So fine. So this happens. It looks really bad for Texas. It looks horrible. If you're a woman, you just have to, look at this and say, this is what we told you and warned you about. If you're anybody with a sense of compassion, you have to look and say, this is horrible for Kate Cox and her family.
Yes.
So Garrett and the other reporters turned to both Cruz and Cornyn, senators from Texas, and said, so what do you think about this? Cruz said, call my office. When you call his office said, ask Cruz.
Yeah, right. He's super debater guy. What happened to...
said, I'm a federal official. I'm not going to comment on state issues. And Garrett Haake said that either typically chatty Texas senator would touch this story says a lot about the political potency of the abortion issue generally and the horrifying specifics of this case specifically, all of which is true.
Yep. They have no answer.
They have no answer, so they don't want to talk about it.
I mean, I understand. There are a lot of things I have no answer on. I don't want to talk about it either, but these were of their making.
Therefore, from a political perspective, every Democrat ought to be talking about this constantly.
Right. Sure.
And
why
will.
not? Okay. They should. The eyes of everything else is upon Texas now.
Yep.
So
the whole idea, I think, who was it? Michelle Goldberg had a story about this, opinion piece.
Almost assuredly.
In the New York Times, with the title, A Texas Case Shows That Abortion Ban Exemptions Are a Sham.
Yeah.
And they are.
She's right.
Because we're against abortion except in the case. Well, I'm not even doing it except in the case. Okay, well, fine. At least you're honest about what you're doing. Well, no, we'll do the fig leaf of except, this so that we can be, compassionate.
Right.
All right. Well,
we're not
what are the
crazy.
exemptions? Well, whatever they are, we're not going to let you do them, but we'll have them.
Yeah.
You got to give us credit for having them.
Look, it says so right here in the law. Oh, I tried to use it.
Can you actually do them?
That's
no,
your fault.
We're not going to let you do that. But, we have them. So don't tell us that we're not compassionate. That's basically what she says in her column.
Well, she's correct about that. And
when you ask Cruz and Cornyn about it, they say, well, it's, either call my office or I'm a federal official. It has nothing to do with, anything. Well, what are you going to do at the federal level?
Yeah. Right, of course.
Call Cruz's office.
Don't call mine. I'm not.
Don't call mine.
Cornyn is smart enough to say, call Cruz's office.
Yeah.
We don't know.
Ask me. Ask
what happened to
Chris.
the debating society captain? It's amazing. He wanted to imagine that as your answer in the Princeton debate team. Call my office. You lost the debate, sir. All right. Well, too bad he's not in front of a jury now. Yeah, that's true. So the exceptions are a ruse. But what are you going to do? Don't trust those guys.
Right.
I'm a federal
Don't trust
official.
them when they tell you that they just want parental influence and input into schools.
Yeah.
Don't trust them when they tell you that there are exemptions.
Right.
Don't trust them about anything.
Yeah.
They're Republicans. And how do we look at the electors? The electors are all Republicans that are getting indicted. These indictments about Trump are all about the Republican Party. That throughput, that connection is something that the campaign still has to do, but they absolutely positively have to do it.
I guess that's true. When was who's the last Democratic elector to be indicted for his election activities?
I don't know, but it's probably Robert Menendez, and if it wasn't, it was George Santos.
Maybe. Although those guys, because they're
Santos
like
told you
Cornyn,
he was a
federal
Republican,
officials,
but he was really a Democrat. I mean,
that's
at
right.
least that morning he was.
That's something they could end up claiming before his trials are done. Right? What's your name? Anthony DeVolder, George Santos. I don't know. What party are you from? Democrat.
Did you see that video that I sent you? Did you wind up seeing the whole
Oh,
thing?
yeah. I saw it.
Very
we think
funny,
he's
from Jared Moskowitz.
Yes, we think he's gone, but not forgotten. But we don't know how gone he is. He could show up at any time with a different name. George DeVolder, Santa Claus, whatever. We're not sure. Yeah, crazy.
So let's talk a little bit about election stuff. There was a whole bunch of bad polls for Biden on Monday. One good one, though, that nobody talks about because you're only allowed to talk about bad polls.
That's right.
The good one was from Monmouth, which basically showed a tie. Hypothetical rematch between Biden and Trump. Each received support from 42%.
Yeah. I can't believe
and as Walter Shapiro noted, the truth that nobody wants to talk about is that it's a close election and nobody really knows who's going to win. But, that's not the narrative. So you have to have some other narrative. Now, Dan Pfeiffer, who's, as you know, once you win a campaign, you then are on the fast track for becoming somebody whose job it is to tell you how to think and what to say.
Yes, even if it was 30 years ago.
Yeah, David Axelrod, in this case, Dan Pfeiffer.
Newt Gingrich.
Pfeiffer says why
Rick
Democrats
Santorum.
should embrace Trump as the front runner.
Embrace.
Which is an interesting point.
Don't embrace
Do you
Trump.
remember this
ever,
line from
by
Good
the
Will
way.
Hunting? Okay.
What?
Do you like apples?
Yeah, I remember that one. Sure. I mean, you're not asking me that.
You keep saying that it's better to run from behind than ahead. Well, Biden's down by 2 points. How do you like them apples?
Okay, I guess. No,
I look
don't
at that and say, I hate those apples.
Right.
I'd really rather run like I'm 2 points ahead, not 2 points behind. I hate saying that.
Yeah.
I like winning. I hate losing.
So, okay.
On the other hand, Pfeiffer says, look, just embrace it. Biden's behind by 2. Democrats have to rally. Be afraid of what would happen if Trump should win.
We should
that
be
doesn't
that
mean
way
he will
anyway.
win.
Right.
We're going to prevent it from winning, and you got to
Right.
work to do that. Get motivated. If this is what motivates you, get motivated.
Okay.
Here's what you've been asking for. Here's your opportunity.
Yes.
Well, okay, but I want another Democrat, just not that Democrat. I want another way of looking at the election, just not that way of looking at the election.
Yeah, I guess so. Well, there's always some contradiction baked in. We're weird people.
Yeah, exactly. So the response from the Democratic side, he writes, was numbingly familiar. There's a group of online progressive Biden defenders who simply deny the polls are correct. They raise questions about the methodology or the pollster or distrust the numbers. I'm one of those.
Okay.
I'm not really sure. I think there's a lot of differential non-response, which means that the out party is going to answer polls a whole lot more than the in party at this far ahead of the election. And so I don't feel like answering the phone. I'm not really happy with what's going on in the world, and I'm not into it. I'm not into you. I don't want to answer the phone. And so I think there's a lot of that. That doesn't really tell you how those people are going to vote in November.
Okay.
So I think there's some of that. Other Democrats, he writes, immediately pounce on any poll that shows the race tied or narrowing as evidence that the tide is turning. I don't think that at all. There's no such thing as a tide. It's a close race. That means some polls are going to show one guy ahead, and some polls are going to show the other guy ahead. That's what happens in close races, margin of error and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And he writes, I get it. The polls were off significantly in 2016 and 2020. For Donald Trump to lead in the polls after 4 years of chaotic incompetence, one failed violent insurrection, and 91 felony charges is nauseating. None of it speaks well about the state of the country, but instead of denying that Trump's a favorite to be the next president, embrace it. Here's why. 1, the polls are a red herring. 2, the best candidates are underdogs. 3, focus on the stakes, as Jay Rosen likes to say. And then finally, one notable fact about all these supposedly great polls for Trump, in almost all of them, he's under 50%. Remember, he's a proto-incumbent.
Mm-hmm.
You can't win a two-way race without getting to 50.
Yeah. Right. And we fear, of course, it not being two-way, but...
Well,
okay.
That's why all the independent candidates like Robert Kennedy and Cornel West and Jill Stein and Dean Phillips, you can't fill a room at a local gas station for people coming to see him. In the Wall Street Journal poll, candidates other than Biden and Trump are getting 17% of the vote. They're not getting 17% of the vote next November.
No.
And more than half of those voters will pick Biden if they're forced to choose between the president and his predecessor. Every one of them needs to know a vote for anyone other than Joe Biden makes the second Trump era inevitable. So it's very possible to believe, as I do, he writes, that Joe Biden will win and still accept the reality that Trump could too. The polls say Trump's a front runner. Why should we deny Trump the scrutiny from the media? This is the important point. And the electorate that comes from being ahead in the polls. Trump skipped the debates and nobody has to question him about what he said. He has all his I want to be a dictator stuff on Newsmax and other things that normal people don't watch. So they have no idea he's saying this garbage every night. That's why the convictions are so important, because that gets in the news. And reporters who are, I'm tired of covering the same thing. He says every day he's a dictator. It's not news. He said that 5 days ago. I wrote a story about it.
Yeah.
Now you're asking me to write a story about it again because he's still saying it.
I don't know what you guys think you write during the height of campaign season, but it too is the same thing over and over again. You just have a byline in a different state because the show moved.
A tangential comment on that.
Yeah.
Paul Waldman, who has a similar name to yours.
That is true. Paul, very close to my name.
Right. David, Paul, very similar. So Paul Waldman used to write for the Washington Post. And now Washington Post is offering buyouts to people.
I'll take one.
He's out. And now he has his own Substack that he's writing.
Oh, okay. By the way, Washington Post, you're writing the wrong name on the check. My name's David.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll take it.
So
Paul needs it, I'm sure. Go ahead, yeah.
He said, I'm doing Substack, and actually I'm very relieved to be able to do this, he writes. And I'm paraphrasing here because I don't have his exact comments in front of me, but it's something along the lines of, as Cassidy Hutchinson is fond of saying, something along the lines of, the thing about writing columns is that if you have something pithy to say but the news didn't happen within 48 hours, that is to say, you want to write about something but it happened 4 weeks ago, and yet you still think you have something interesting to say, your editors will tell you it's not fresh, do something else.
True, probably. I guess he's the one
who's saying it.
I believe him. Yeah. I mean, that's why I don't, I guess, get hired by anything I want to talk about happened in 1787.
Yeah, exactly. I want to talk about caning.
Yeah,
the floor of the house. I think it's important.
And that's like fresh compared to that. Yeah. All right, Paul. I mean, I don't love Substack, but what are you going to do? Yeah, so we love Paul Waldman.
You should love Substacks. I hate the idea that it's you got to pay for a lot of this stuff.
Well, that doesn't bother me too much. It's owned by weirdos, and we'll get to that. Yeah, but on the other hand,
basically, you know what it is? It's blogs. And you and I grew up on blogs,
right? It's blogs where somehow somebody is they're getting money for it, which is good, but B, somebody is taking a skim from it, which is bad, and those people are bad, but. In the meantime, Paul gets to continue writing and live, so I think I'm for that.
Yeah, and a lot of good people have gone there. And you can find them there. And there's other places, Medium and other places that are a similar thing. But to me, I like it because it's blogs, and I'm a blogger, so I like blogs.
I like the substance of what it is. It's like PayPal. That
And
works,
I like
but
the
I hate the
idea
people
that you
who
can
owned
write
it.
about something that's more than 48 hours old.
That's true. No one can stop you.
But getting back to the original point here, because Trump isn't saying something new and different within the last 48 hours, they're not putting it up every day, and you don't see it and you don't hear it. So Dan Pfeiffer's making the point.
But people learn by repetition.
And we talked about this a little bit on Monday. It's hard to attack him until he's the candidate, but once he's the candidate, you get to attack him, and then it becomes news, even though it's the same thing you said before he was the candidate.
But he's the candidate.
But he's a candidate now, so now we have to cover it because those are the rules, and I don't make the rules.
Yeah, I guess. But so I moved to Substack where I make the rules, and I now will. Okay, now you can
write
make
about whatever I want.
I guess that's true.
You may not read it because it's on Substack now.
Yeah.
But media on the whole, have this fetish about, well, it's got to be fresh, it's got to be new. It only counts if my reporter asks the question. Otherwise, we don't report it. It's only my poll that I'm going to report today, not the other one that says the opposite. There's just a lot of that, and that's the way the media has always been. It's the way the media is always going to be. Some of them are in for it for the click. Some of them try to do straight news, but the guys that own the stations are basically Republican operatives because they want to have lower taxes so they can keep their money. We all know that. That's just part of the deal, and that's why media isn't going to save democracy. But sometimes playing by their rules, you basically wind up forcing them to cover the stuff you want to be covered, and that's what Pfeiffer's saying here. And one of the ways you do that is you make Trump the front runner, and they're obligated to cover the front runner, so cover him.
Yeah. I don't know what anybody's waiting for.
Doesn't change anything. Doesn't change anything about the polls or who's going to win in November, so who cares?
I guess.
You want to be the front runner?
Like
fine, you're the front runner. Go talk to media every day, and if they don't, they'll say you're avoiding them. Go ahead.
Yeah, although sometimes they say it and it doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't change anything. We had whole campaigns for governors of various states, even places where people knew they needed personal protection from the long arm of the law. You had people running for governor in states / commonwealths like that.
You have Governor Montana who body slams reporters.
Yeah, right.
But Simon Rosenberg, the Hopium guy, says, listen, here's a list of things you have to remember about Trump. And I will point out to you they're not 48 hours old, and therefore within 48 hours, so you may not hear about it every day. But still, Trump is, and here's this list, convicted of attempting to rape a woman in a department store, oversaw one of the largest financial frauds in U.S. history, took more money from foreign governments than any politician ever, no one more responsible for ending Roe, led an armed attack on the U.S. Congress, led a party-wide effort to over a presidential election and end American democracy, responsible for the biggest security breach in U.S. history, appeased Putin, coddled dictators, worked to undermine American power and interests, wants the planet to warm faster, more dead kids in schools, 10-year-olds to give birth, tens of millions to lose health insurance, deport tens of millions of people. So report that.
And if you don't want to, he also won't have a beer with you. That is important, and you should finally report. I don't know why you guys like to focus on that, but that's also true.
He's on trial, fine, but when he's convicted, report that.
Yeah, you should. But Simon's list is good too.
Yep. So and all those things are true.
Holy mackerel!
Those things
of course. Yeah, no exaggeration. But
what about killing 10-year-olds? That was during COVID.
Oh yeah, right, true. Plus, he also wants them to have children, which is amazing.
Well, at least
10-year-olds are really bearing
the
the brunt of
female
this.
children.
Right. True. He only wants to target them. So, 50% of your kids are safe. I mean, from him personally. But the rest, that 50% doesn't mean the rest of them are safe from other things. But those are things they probably, you see, Democrats are terrible. They're trying to go after the other 50%.
Here is a conundrum that we can't solve in 2 minutes. No, I'm not talking about the Middle East. I'm talking about what do you do when House Republicans have to vote yes on something in order to get legislation passed, but refuse to do so for reasons, and those reasons really don't have to be spelled out because they're not necessarily cohate. They're not necessarily coherent.
I can just vote no, but yeah. But we need to vote yes.
Biden wants to give more aid to Israel and especially Ukraine.
Yeah.
And Republicans in the House don't want to, maybe because they're beholden to Putin for other reasons. They want to use that leverage to bargain for draconian changes to asylum policy on the border. They don't want border security because Democrats keep offering that, and they say, no, that's not what we want. So does Biden make that deal? And, part of the discussion there is if we make the deal, at least we get Ukraine paid for. We'll deal with the immigration fallout afterwards. And even discussing it gets everybody mad, just like even discussing anything in the Middle East gets everybody mad. But you still have to govern, and you still have to make those choices, and you still have to negotiate. And that's the state of the development right now. Zelensky comes to Washington. He doesn't change Republican minds because they don't have a mind to change. Who are you supposed to negotiate with? The people who are willing to negotiate are not the people who you have to negotiate with. So what do you do? And, that's the state of the art in Washington. And that, my friends, is why you don't elect Republicans to Congress.
Yes. Republicans have been fumbling the ball on Ukraine for many, many years now. One more opportunity to remind you that, yes, the stupid taped conversation where Kevin McCarthy says he thinks Putin pays Trump was, at the start, a discussion about what Republicans ought to be doing while Ukrainian officials were in town begging for help against the Russians.
Right.
And they flubbed it.
Right. And why Dana Rohrabacher is not one of the ones to rely on for this.
Yeah, and he's gone. And then all the Republicans who said, you know what, though, really, we've had our fun, but seriously, at bottom here, we need to do something about Russia and help Ukraine. And they said, yeah, we should be doing that. And they're all gone now.
So Fiona Hill's quote when they interviewed her in Politico, they're thinking less about U.S. national security, European security, international security, and foreign policy, and much more about how they can humiliate Biden. That's their goal. Yeah,
that's true. That's what they're interested in doing.
That's, my friends, why you don't elect Republicans to Congress.
Yeah.
They do not put the interests of the United States above their own parochial interests.
Yeah.
That's why they're going to impeach Biden today. Or at least they're going to suggest that we do an inquiry.
But really, really do it.
Which will inevitably lead to the same thing. But we won't stop it because we're Republicans. And really, the goal here isn't so much to fact find, it's to humiliate Biden.
Mm-hmm. Just as
so, of course, we're going to do it.
The inclusion of the border issues.
Meanwhile, Mike Lawler, one of the people who's supposed moderate from New York who will vote for this, is really upset about that New York State court decision because it's going to impact his district.
Yeah.
And he doesn't like the idea of politics interfering with politics.
Oh, no. Don't mix politics and politics because, I don't know. All right. Well, of course he's upset about it and worried. He should be.
Well, you're going to vote to fund Ukraine? Are you going to vote not to impeach Biden because there's no there there?
No. Yes.
No.
But also yes. All right. Welcome back now to Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Man, oh man, there's so much to catch up on and no real time to actually do it. But here we go. There's a lot of good points made here in the first half of today's show. We'll expand on them as we explore what is stored in Pocket today. Let's see. My goodness. Not even sure exactly where to start. Let me just get back on track by going over something we discussed a little bit yesterday. There's more reaction to what's happening in Jack Smith's corner of the world, and it's Margaret Sullivan who's writing. So, good bet that it's going to be of some interest. I liked the headline, and I guess things, I don't know. I think we did a pretty good job covering them yesterday, but 1, I don't know for sure. 2, I can't remember. 3, we only did it for an hour, which certainly means we need another hour on it today. She writes in The Guardian today, the 13th, yes. Special counsel Jack Smith made a gutsy, momentous decision in his prosecution of Donald Trump. That would be trying to leapfrog the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, not because he doesn't like them, not because he doesn't expect to get the result he needs out of them, but because he's tired of Donald Trump and his BS and just says, all right, you want to play games? Fine. We'll play one more game on your stupid thing. And the Supreme Court, it's taken a bit of a gamble, but honestly, given that this whole thing essentially sets up as, look, is it the case that people who get elected president are immune from everything forever, even after they're president? Yes or no? It's very hard to imagine even the worst of the Republicans on the Supreme Court saying, yeah, we're ready to endorse that. I mean, he may still get Clarence Thomas to agree to that for some reason, but really, maybe not. I mean, there have been Trump election cases that have been unanimous decisions against him in the past, and I, got to imagine that this is one too, because there's just no way to slice this case, certainly not the way Smith has presented it here. I mean, I don't know exactly what options are available to the Trump team here to try to parse this, but they may want to. I assume they're going to try to come up with a way of responding to Smith's filing that gives the court a different question to decide. Yes, the question is framed this way, but why does Smith get to frame the question this way? We should have an opportunity to say, let's frame it differently, and they're going to try and do it. And I don't know how much success they're going to have with it, but let's see what she had to say. And now I also note for the record that there are more notes coming in from Greg, and that usually means something we should pay some attention to, and very often means something I wish I had more time to explain to you, and can't wait for tomorrow, even though we got another show ahead of us. But sometimes it ends up waiting. Let's see what's going on here. We've started with Margaret Sullivan. We'll finish. Smith, the subheader says, has asked the Supreme Court to rule urgently on whether Trump has legal immunity, as the ex-president claims. Remember, urgently is super important, just like strenuously object. Now, it doesn't make any real difference, but it is a substantive request. Not only should you be ruling on this, we need you to do it right away. So, well, let's see. Timing isn't everything. I don't know. I guess it's true that on the most basic level, timing is not everything. There are other things. But, okay. Why are we disproving this? It isn't everything, but it certainly matters. Okay, just a rhetorical device. And seldom more so than in Special Counsel Jack Smith's prosecution of Donald Trump, the former U.S. president intends to use timing, delay, to avoid punishment for trying to overturn the 2020 election, which he lost to Joe Biden, and for fomenting a violent coup and all the other various things that he did. That even just the things Jack Smith has charged him with, like stealing all of that classified information and doing God knows what with it. The attempt here is, if we delay enough and we run an election and I can either win the election or steal the election or convince people that I am president now and that I have the right to pardon myself, I will do that, and then this will go away. That's what he's going for. Nope, says Smith, at least this week, and he really has always said that. A tough guy, Smith, who has prosecuted war crimes in The Hague, though we wish he were prosecuting those right now against Trump in here, much less in The Hague. Anyway, he is a tough guy, apparently. Smith clearly recognizes that putting off the case until after the next fall's presidential election could let Trump off the hook. Indeed, it's everything that there is, really. I mean, if Trump is permitted to assume the presidency, there's no more prosecution for him, and it effectively destroys the idea that presidents are accountable for their actions. So, the prosecutor made a bold legal maneuver. Smith moved to bypass the Court of Appeals, whose involvement could slow things down considerably, and go directly to the U.S. Supreme Court for a decision on a foundational issue. He wants the U.S.'s highest court to rule immediately on whether Trump, as he claims, is immune from criminal prosecution. Jack Smith wants to cut straight to the chase, writes former U.S. Attorney Joyce Vance, noting that the Supreme Court has never decided this issue before, and of course, it's never been asked this question before, really. Well, I guess indirectly it kind of has been, but and it has expressed its opinion, and legal scholars of all kinds have expressed the same opinion, both in the context of a Supreme Court case and outside of it. Yeah, of course, it's a basic tenet of everything here in this country that no one is above the law. Sure, we've carved out exceptions for people who happen to be the one and only president of the United States at the time, but the excuse has always been, it seems unfair that the president gets to be above the law for reasons, But you can always take comfort in knowing that if they actually do something illegal, the reason the law still applies to the presidency is after they're president, they would be subject to criminal prosecution if necessary, even for things that they could claim presidential immunity for while in office. And that got everybody to settle down. And now it turns out that Trump is trying to claim, well, you were all wrong about that. There's no way to prosecute a president for anything he does in office, whether he's there now or not. If it took place during a presidency, he's immune. And in fact, if it took place after a presidency, he's so special that he should be immune from that too. It's crazy, but that's what they're arguing. As dumb as it is, no, the court has never addressed it before because no one's been audacious enough to make that claim. And I don't know. Do I need to explain this to you? What Smith is doing is saying, this is so dumb that I effing dare you to take this claim. And I don't want people screwing around with this for 2 years. It's so dumb that, in all likelihood, the appeals court will say, nope, this is too dumb. And then he'll appeal and want an en banc rehearing, and the whole panel will say, nope, it's too dumb. But if it takes 15 seconds, it's too damn long, because everyone knows that the Supreme Court, by all rights, should also say, nope, it's too dumb. So why wait? The fact is, even if it takes 15 seconds, during the 15 seconds that it has not yet been appealed to the Supreme Court, Trump will be saying, well, it's not over till it's over. Well, Jack Smith says, let's just make it over. So, where are we? Should the court rule in Trump's favor on immunity, the case goes away. That looks like a gamble, but the case is headed to the Supreme Court anyway. So the key question is rather simple. Is Trump above the law? Or, like every other U.S. citizen, must he abide by it? Smith's maneuver was heralded by several prominent legal experts. A huge and possibly brilliant move, a game changer one way or the other. Harry Litman, former Justice Department official who teaches constitutional law, wrote on Twitter, so far, the signs are encouraging. The court granted Smith's request to speed up the question of whether to hear the case. Again, not the case, but the question of whether to hear the case got speeded up anyway, asking for a quick response from Team Trump. In other words, the court quickly agreed to decide whether to decide the case, an important first step. Of course, this Supreme Court doesn't exactly inspire confidence, given its terrible rulings on voting rights and abortion rights and the appalling ethical malfeasance of some of its members. But even this tainted court probably doesn't want to be associated for all time with the notion that a U.S. president is above the law. And as we have pointed out, particularly given that the U.S. president at the moment is Joe Biden and not Donald Trump, but if you endorse the idea that U.S. presidents can do anything always and forever, well, you want to keep in mind that one of the things that they apparently could do is, well, at the very least, let's say, change the makeup of the Supreme Court right here, right now. But that's illegal. Yeah, well, so what? We just ruled that illegal stuff isn't illegal if the president does it. We endorsed the Nixon doctrine. If the president does it, that means it isn't illegal. Oh, well, what are the things that they could do? Well, some of the things that they could do would be ending the terms of certain members of the Supreme Court. Whether, because everything ended for that member of the Supreme Court or not. Well, what can you do? You can't. Well, the law says, the Constitution says all you can do to remove somebody from office is impeach them. There is no other avenue. And you can't do that without the Senate. Oh, you mean if I said they're under arrest or I'm forcibly moving them to Devil's Island or something like that? That would be, well, there's no legal mechanism for that. Yes, I know. It would be an illegal mechanism. But the point is that illegal mechanisms aren't illegal if the president does it. So what are you going to do? I don't know. I mean, it's just so dumb a prospect that you got to imagine that they would say, it's just too dumb for us. And if you don't think that they're going to reach that conclusion, then again, what do you do other than say, well, I'm sorry, but since nothing's illegal for me, look, I don't really want to be the guy that executes you, but you're not on the Supreme Court anymore. What the hell? Who says that? That's illegal. Yeah, I know. But who cares? Oh, I see your point. But you hope that they would consider that ahead of time. Anyway, where did she leave off here? We got to Rico. We got to re-go to where we left off. Right. Even this tainted court probably doesn't want to be associated for all time with this stupid notion. Watching Jack Smith's aggressive efforts throughout this prosecution, I can't help but think of two earlier high-level legal situations involving presidents. And how could you help but think about high-level legal situations involving presidents? This is one. One was decades ago during the Watergate scandal when the Supreme Court ruled that President Nixon's tape recordings were fair game. Nixon had appointed some of those justices, but the ruling was unanimous nonetheless. That ruling was among the many contributing factors in holding Nixon accountable to some extent for the crimes he encouraged while in office. Ultimately, of course, he resigned and was pardoned by his successor, Gerald Ford. The other, much more recent, was the way Special Counsel Robert Mueller handled the investigation into whether Trump and his allies played ball with the Russian operatives in order to sway the outcome of the 2016 presidential election. Unlike Smith, Mueller was particularly rules-bound and reserved. I don't know that that's not the case with Smith, actually, but okay. He never wanted to rock the procedural boat. His extremely low-key approach hampered the outcome of his important investigation. I mean, Smith is rules-bound, and he's personally reserved. I guess you could say he's a little more adventurous, legally speaking, but then again, Mueller didn't have an insurrection and the theft of classified documents in his corner either, so we can't be sure how he would have handled things, but I'm glad to not have to ask that question, I think. With the help of, where are we? Do we leave this? Yes. With the help of Attorney General Bill Barr's dishonest work and interpreting it favorably on Trump's behalf, Mueller's report dwindled into something that ultimately didn't matter much, though it should have. Trump ran around claiming he was entirely cleared and it was all a hoax, though that was far from true. But it mostly worked, I think. Smith is a different cat, it says. Thinking strategically at all times, he knows he needs to stay on track for a March trial date in order to hold Trump accountable, and if that doesn't happen, the strategy of delaying the trial until after the November election could, if Trump is elected, allow him to install an unpatriotic loyalist as Attorney General and wiggle out of the mess he created. He doesn't even need to do that. He can just pardon himself. That makes what happens next so consequential. Smith wisely is hedging his bet by asking the Court of Appeals to rule immediately, too, should the Supreme Court decide not to take on the matter after all. Okay. But, let's see. It may be the most important democracy decision of our lifetimes. Norm Eisen, senior fellow at the Brookings Institution, has argued. Could be, for two reasons, and she covers them quickly. One is that some members of the voting public, the non-cult members at least, might be affected by a guilty verdict. Given Trump's obvious authoritarian plans for second term, his election could be a death knell for U.S. democracy. And that would suck, right? The other is that no president or former president should be above the law. We all thought that that was the case, but it could turn out you're pretty wrong. Let's hope that the Supreme Court, whatever its shortcomings, does its duty, takes on this question and rules in accordance with our nation's founding principles, or at least what you thought they were for the entire time you've been alive and conscious of our having guiding principles, plus the previous 200 years worth of people thinking that they had lived in a country with certain legal principles as well. All right, let's see what's causing so much activity in the background here. I got to scroll down to the end and find out, okay, what came in after our call ended. There we are. Okay, let's see. There's a tweet from Aaron Rupar. Youngkin, super moderate guy. Remember, he has a vest and everything to prove it. Says that he will support Trump if Trump is the GOP candidate. So super moderate, totally not a Trumper, etc., etc. No call for that whatsoever, but there he is out there doing that. And let's see, what else have we got here? Maggie Jordan tweeting as well. Let's see. 91 criminal charges, 4 jurisdictions, apparently, says Maggie Jordan. She's been charged with 91 criminal charges? That's crazy. Oh, it's about Trump. I see. The appeals court upholds a federal judge's decision to reject Trump's claim of immunity, finding he had waited too long to raise the defense. Not really a super great ruling, but that's interesting, and it kind of changes the dynamics, which is why I guess Greg has been sending all of this information to us. Let me open up both of these tweets so that I can include them in the roundup. Oh, all right. We got to go back to Skype to do that. There's the Aaron Rupar one. And then let me switch the order here. Maggie Jordan. So let's see. Appeals. So does that mean the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals decided, you saw or heard me read to you that one of the things that, who are we reading here? Just a Maggie Maggie. Does she go by Maggie? Margaret Sullivan. Did I just make that up in my head? It's Maggie Haberman. Okay. It goes by that. All right. Well, at any rate, she was pointing out that, belt and suspenders, just in case the Supreme Court, doesn't decide to take up the case super quickly. Jack Smith also said, well, at a minimum, let me also ask the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, to whom the appeal is being brought. I'm trying to skip them, but in case they won't be skipped or the Supreme Court won't allow us to skip them, I'm asking the Court of Appeals to rule immediately or as soon as possible on the immunity question. And I guess they're beginning to do that. Let's see what's happening here. Appeals court upholds federal judge's decision to reject Trump's claim of immunity, finding it waited too long to raise the defense. Oh, but this comes in a different context, I guess, because there's a note here. Jean Carroll, that is, sued in November of 2019, and Trump asserted immunity in December of 2022. A 3-year delay is more than enough under our precedents to qualify as undue. Okay, so this is a ruling in the context of the E. Jean Carroll case, which naturally the Trump defense team in the Jack Smith case won't take to be applicable. That's a very different thing. You see, and they'll be right. They'll say, well, someone will say, aha, see, a DC, or not necessarily a DC court, but a federal appeals court has said, no, there's no federal immunity claim here for you just because you were president at the time that she made these accusations against you. But the Trump team will be able to claim, but we were disallowed from using immunity because the court said we didn't raise the objection in a timely fashion. And here in the Smith case, we are raising the objection in a timely fashion. So timely, in fact, that we demand that this hearing be held on an interlocutory basis. And that's the earliest that we're going to be able to make this claim of immunity. And we're timely on that one. So, it won't really apply. They'll have to the Supreme Court will end up being forced, I think, to acknowledge on a totally different basis that Trump isn't allowed to make use of this argument. So, okay, that is of some interest. Let's see what else has come in since then. All right, we just read that one. And now, a new piece from the Hill. Supreme Court will hear a challenge to January 6th obstruction. And with the note that if the Supreme Court sides with the rioters, and they really should not, it would undermine those charges in other January 6th cases, including the former presidents. So I guess that's hanging out there. We better take a look at what's in the Hill on this one. Ella Lee reporting this news for the Hill. What's going on? The Supreme Court indicated Wednesday that it will take up a challenge to an obstruction law, like they're actually challenging the constitutionality of the law that says it's against the law to obstruct an official proceeding, including Congress. All right, well, let's read it. They'll take up a challenge to an obstruction law used against scores of January 6th rioters and former President Trump as well. They'll take it up in this next term, not necessarily on an expedited basis. But Joseph Fisher, a former police officer accused of being a January 6th rioter, because he was, petitioned the High Court to eliminate one of the several counts he faces, obstruction of an official proceeding. Let's see if this is just loony or not. The charge, not that the court wouldn't help him out with it, the charge criminalizes, quote, corruptly obstructing, impeding, or interfering with an official government proceeding and carries a maximum penalty of 20 years in prison. Fisher's case is joined with two other rioters' cases, Edward Lang and Garrett Miller, who say that they may have, essentially they must be arguing, well, yeah, I obstructed an official proceeding, but I didn't do so corruptly. I did so with the purest of motivations, which is why I smeared feces on the wall. I don't know if it was either of those guys, but DNA should tell us, by the way, who that was. I just didn't want to do that detective work. But it's out there. We were doing it for pure and good reasons of patriotism and awesomeness, not corrupt reasons of patriotism and awesomeness. So you can't charge us with that, is the claim here. Hundreds of rioters who stormed the Capitol on January 6th have faced the same charge, the official proceeding being Congress's official count of the Electoral College votes, the final step of the presidential election process that certified President Biden's win over Trump in the 2020 election. And if I'm not mistaken, by the way, the claim in another aspect of a different case, for instance, the 14th Amendment case, is that Trump isn't a official in the definition of the 14th Amendment, Section 3, so that such that because president isn't official under the United States, and so therefore it somehow doesn't apply. I mean, that's a very dumb interpretation of things, and just facially absurd, but it's out there. People are arguing it. But you should also be aware of the fact that people have argued along the way that I didn't obstruct an official proceeding of the U.S. Congress because that wasn't one. Not because they didn't recognize the authority of Congress, but because the counting of the electoral count isn't somehow an official proceeding. Well, you'll have to prove to me that it was official enough. And this is one of the things where, the court says, as dumb as it is, we do have to waste some time on that one. And, okay, now we do find that was an official proceeding. Okay, well, in that case, it says I have to have interrupted it corruptly. And I disagree that I interrupted it corruptly. I did it beautifully and wonderfully. All right, well, we're going to have to take time to rule on that one too. It's annoying, but that's kind of the way that, the justice system works. Did you meet all the elements of the crime? So let's see. Trump himself faces the same charge, of course, in connection with his efforts to overturn the 2020 election, meaning any Supreme Court decision on the matter could affect his federal criminal case, which is expected to head trial in Washington, D.C. early next year, March 4th, as a matter of fact. Yes, this could impact things. But, of course, if these guys lose their case, Team Trump will say, all right, that's as may be, but we find it inapplicable to our case because those guys weren't president and I was, so it's totally different. And then we'll all have to waste time on whether or not the question is actually different. Fisher's petition to the High Court argues that hundreds of cases awaiting trial would benefit from the justice's clarification of the statute, providing critical guidance to district courts, prosecutors, and defense counsel. The Hill requested comment from Fisher's counsel. I guess they didn't get it. The charge stems from a law enacted in 2002 in the wake of the Enron scandal, in case you thought it had to do with just the January 6th riots. The February 6th riots we didn't care about so much. I don't know of any, but just a mistake. The energy company went bankrupt and several top executives were imprisoned for fraud and other offenses. Then a senator, at the time, that is, a senator, Joe Biden, when he was in the Senate, referred to the new subsection at the time as making it a crime for document shredding, I guess to do document shredding, a sentiment noted by the U.S. District Judge Carl Nichols in his decision to throw out Miller's obstruction charge upon finding it did not cover his conduct. Nichols also dismissed the charge in Fisher's and Lang's case. So, obviously, that being appealed by the Justice Department. The Justice Department, now under Biden, rejected that representation in its appeal of Nichols' decision to toss the three rioters' obstruction charges, arguing that actions such as burning a building to conceal the bodies of murder victims would also be encompassed by the statute. Congress prohibited conduct that intentionally and wrongfully obstructs official proceedings. Justice Department Appellate Counsel James Pierce wrote, "The ordinary meaning of obstruct, influence, or impede encompasses a range of conduct designed to frustrate an official proceeding. In a 2-1 ruling earlier this year, the Federal Appeals Court sided with the Justice Department by finding that Nichols wrongly dismissed the obstruction charge in the 3 rioters' cases. Judge Florence Pan noted in her ruling that Nichols was the only district court judge overseeing January 6th cases to rule in that manner. More than a dozen other Washington District Court judges agreed with the Justice Department's portrayal of the law. Although the opinions of those district judges are not binding on us, the appeals court, the near unanimity of the rulings is striking, as well as the thorough and persuasive reasoning in the decision," Pan wrote. Judge Gregory Katsas, who sided with Nichols, suggested the Justice Department's interpretation was, pre-wrong. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I think we can put this to rest rather quickly. I mean, look, one clarification I want to add here is that it's not entirely clear, just as it wouldn't be clear if the DC, no, was it the DC Circuit that was dealing with this? I think so. If the DC Circuit holds, as it did, 2-1, that the Justice Department is right here, and these guys can be charged with doing this, and they did act corruptly, or at least it's a reasonable finding. It's reasonable both to ask, did they do this corruptly, and it's reasonable for a jury to find that their actions were corrupt. It's their argument, of course, that it's impossible to find our actions to have been corrupt because we felt that we were in the right. And so now the Supreme Court will take up that question, I guess. Is it possible that they felt they were in the right and so therefore they don't meet the definition of corruptly? They could, in fact, find that to be the case. And the one judge in this D.C. Circuit panel says, I think Nichols, the judge below, was right to say that you can't just conclude that our actions were in fact corrupt if we feel like they weren't. So let's see. Judge Katsas, Gregory Katsas, who sided with Nichols, suggested the Justice Department's interpretation of the crime could supercharge minor advocacy, lobbying, and protest offenses into 20-year felonies. He's basically saying, well, if all it turns on is an assumption or or a finding that the work was corrupt, then you could say it's not just people who riot and smash in the windows and try and occupy the floor of the House during an official proceeding who can be charged with this. But if you are lobbying and you're lobbying with what the government succeeds in convincing a judge is corrupt intent, then you could be sent to prison for it for 20 years. And that would be horrible because reasons. But, I mean, I guess if you stop and think about it, like, if you're doing it with corrupt intent, why is it bad to send you to prison for it? Like, if you know that Congress is about to reach, pick another example. Congress is about to reach a decision on a tax provision. I mean, something pretty mundane and peaceful or whatever, that will subject your client to a higher amount of taxes, whether it's exorbitant or not. It doesn't really matter. Just more taxes will have to be paid. And you think, your client says, I don't want to pay those taxes. And I want you to do whatever you can to convince Congress not to vote for this thing. All right. But if you say, all right, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just bribe members of Congress and say, I know that you might want to conclude differently. Or, for that matter, you might want to conclude in favor of my client, or the position that my client takes, which is that this thing shouldn't be taxable. But just to nail it down, here's $1 million, maybe gold bars, for instance. I give you gold bars and say, this is just to ensure that you vote not to adopt this law that would make my client be subject to this higher rate of taxation. And they agree to do that. And then they pass that law. And then you find out, well, it was a close vote, but in the end, there was one more vote than they needed in the House and one more vote than they needed, or exactly the right number that they needed in the House, exactly the right number they needed in the Senate. And it passed, and I don't know, let's say President Trump is in office and he signs this thing into law, and now the client isn't going to be subject to that taxation. Ordinarily, we say, well, bad news for the rest of us. We got to make up that difference in the taxes. But that's what the Congress decided, and the president decided to sign the thing, and there's nothing we can do about it. As dumb as it is, that's the decision that they made. Now, if you are able to point out, but for corruption, we don't know, or perhaps we do know. We know that this wouldn't have happened. Maybe somebody is dumb enough to text a message to Kenneth Chesebro or someone else, or Mike Romans, and say, I was about to vote yes on this thing because honestly, that should be taxed. But the gold bars changed my mind. I voted no, and now it's not the law, or the opposite, whatever it is. I don't know, whatever the situation may turn out to be. But if you can show that this was corruptly done, why shouldn't the person who arranges that go to prison for 20 years? I mean, I know we like to forgive certain kinds of legalized corruption, i.e., well, I gave you a campaign contribution and you liked that a lot. I mean, we have that allowance in our law. But if you show that it was done corruptly, I don't see why you shouldn't have to pay the penalty for that and go to jail for 20 years when the perfectly legal corruption route was available to you. Not corrupt enough? Can't move enough gold bars this way? Well, we're going to break the law and do it differently. Well, then, yeah, you're going to have to go to jail for that. I don't think Judge Katsas is making any sense here. It could supercharge minor advocacy, lobbying, and protest offenses into 20-year felonies. Well, when they involve corruption, they should. And, well, what does corrupt mean? Well, why not let judges decide what corrupt means? I mean, sometimes they're right and sometimes they're wrong. Nichols, well, what about if people are wrong and they overcharge people? That could certainly happen. What if they're wrong and they undercharge people? Because that's what it looks like Nichols did. And you're okay with that, and you're trying to uphold that. But the fact is, you're outvoted 2-1. So on the ground, the fact is, Nichols is wrong. He tried to undercharge somebody, and now he's gonna, be charged. Sorry. Well, there's always the backup of the Supreme Court. Now, they may be crazy, and they may, in fact, reverse the D.C. Circuit, but we're going to have to sit there and take it, right? Apparently, because that's the way the rules work. Unless, of course, a Republican is being charged, in which case, screw all of that. Anyway, I was going to say, by way of wrapping up, it does say here, several members of the extremist Proud Boys and Oath Keepers groups faced the charge and were convicted, including the leaders of each group, Enrique Tarrio and Stuart Rhodes. Now, dozens of other defendants with less serious cases have pleaded guilty to the charge or have been convicted at trial. And it says this at the end. If the Supreme Court decides with the rioters, it would undermine those charges in other January 6th cases, including the former presidents. Probably, maybe, but I'm not 100% certain because it is one thing to say, well, this particular guy who, look, by day he's a travel agent in Peoria, but on January 6th he showed up and rioted in the Capitol. We say with the corrupt intent to disrupt an official proceeding. Now you say, well, he might not have been corrupt because he believed that he was right in all of this. So let's say that's sustained. And you can't charge him with that. You can charge him with a bunch of other things, but you can't charge him with corruptly disrupting an official proceeding. Well, if you do that because you can't prove that it was corrupt, then that would undermine the charges, similar charges against other January 6th cases, including the former presidents. Would it? It has that potential. Of course, in order for it to be directly applicable in those other January 6th cases, including presidents, the former presidents, you would have to demonstrate that they too believed rightly and reasonably that they were acting without corrupt intent. That might be reasonable in some January 6th defendants' cases. People who said, I didn't know I was wrong. I thought I was right. Because why? Why did you think you were right? And the problem arises is when people start saying, I thought I was right because the president told me I was right. And then when you get to the president's case or other January 6th rioters, you ask, did you think you were right? Yeah, sure. Why did you think you were right? Well, the president told me. Well, of course, that's not available to the president himself, right? Trump can't say, I thought I was right because I told myself I was right. That's not going to fly because, well, who knows whether logic still applies in these cases. But worse still, of course, is he'll say, I thought I was right. And there will be evidence presented that argues the opposite. There's lots of evidence here that indicates that you didn't think you were right, that you were informed several times that you were not right, and that some places along the lines you made comments to people that indicate that you too believe that you were not right, but you were going to do it anyway. To the extent that evidence exists in Trump's case, it just might not work. And it might be the case that this decision, if reversed by the Supreme Court, still doesn't actually undermine the case against the former president. In some cases, in January 6th defendants' cases, there may be similar evidence. And where it exists, it won't matter that they say now that they thought that they were in the right. If there's evidence along the way that shows the opposite, that they did know that they were not in the right, then that won't be directly applicable to their cases. And I don't know how many cases that's going to be true for in the case of your run-of-the-mill January 6th rioter, if there is such a thing. But I'm not positive that that's going to help very much in Trump's case either, given that there's a record replete with evidence that demonstrates that he knew or should have known that he was wrong all along. All right, what else have we got here? Katie Fang tweeting about the same thing, but I don't think it adds too much more. And then, what else? Greg saying, well, maybe in this case, do you mean in this case they should let doctors decide, not judges? Because we could probably do better with doctors deciding the question of whether or not they were operating with corrupt intent. But that case that we're talking about, the corrupt interpretation, should be argued in the spring. Let's see. Texas lets non-experts decide complicated things, so why not have doctors decide it instead of the Supreme Court? Well, why not? And in fact, you would think that there's no provision in law that allows for saying instead of the 9 Supreme Court justices who have been appointed by previous presidents and confirmed to their role on the Supreme Court by the Senate, we're going to bring in 9 doctors. Or 10 doctors, or 1 doctor, just Greg Dworkin. I don't know. And let him decide it. But the Constitution says the 9 justices are to decide it. Of course, it doesn't say 9. That number could change. But it does say that the justices should be the ones to decide it. True, but remember the thing you screwed up when Jack Smith asked you to decide whether or not presidents were immune now and forever? And you said yes because you thought the question was, is Donald Trump immune now and forever? But in fact, you made every president immune now and forever. Well, yes, it's illegal to give this decision to one doctor, but I've done it, and what are you going to do about it? Because I'm immune, and I'll immunize the doctor as well, not just with an injection, but with a pardon. So, sorry, you have no case. There's nothing you can do about that. Of course, the big worry is that they might rule in gimmitarian fashion, either beforehand or afterwards, and say, we actually did mean that only Donald Trump was immune forever. It might be something we expand to other Republican presidents later, but we're definitely not going to expand it to Democratic presidents. We don't really have a good reason for it. We're just writing that down, and that's the decision of the court. And I'm sorry, not sorry. You could do that, but then it means we just don't live in a democracy anymore. There's no rule of law. I mean, again, that might turn out to be true. Can't do too much to comfort you on that one. All right, let's see. Other stories that I thought might be of some importance and interest. We probably need to give more time to that one. Let's hit this one that Scott brought to my attention, just in case you had forgotten about this guy, because I certainly did. What am I looking at here? What's my source? Ground.news. Is that the one that I think you've used this one before, where there's it's like a news aggregator, and it's like, if you want to see, well, I guess if you could be using it, I only want to see conservative opinion on this. Well, you can use it that way. I want to see liberal opinion on this. Yes, sure, you can do that too. But this is the one that breaks down the different coverages and gives you links to all sorts of coverage. The news here, though, straight up, is that the Air Force, you remember them? They're the ones that work underneath, like physically below the Space Force, presumably, but a little higher up than the Army Force. So, sandwiched in between. Yeah, the Air Force disciplines 15 airmen in the investigation of accused leaker Jack Tejera. Remember him? He was the weirdo online guy who was working in the Air Force and stealing classified documents, mostly talking, I think, about the Ukraine war. But anyway, stealing classified documents and trying to use them to look like he was a really cool guy in his online discussion groups. But in fact, he was making a gigantic mistake by violating federal law. The Air Force has now disciplined 15 other personnel for failing to take action on suspicious behavior by an airman, Tejera, who leaked classified documents, resulting in relief from positions and non-judicial punishments. Jack Tejera, member of the Texas? Whenever I see Air National Guard, I think I go to Texas immediately because of George W. Bush. But he was a member of the Massachusetts Air National Guard, and he leaked that highly classified military information and has been arrested on charges under the Espionage Act, correctly. Security lapses, including access to classified documents without supervision and failure to report Tejera's activities, contributed to the leaks, according to the Air Force investigation. So, there you go. Who do you want to read about it? Among the varying, it looks like everybody, they put everybody in a centrist in the bias distribution chart here, except for more liberal bias attributed to the Joe My God blog, and more conservative bias given to Fox News, if you've ever heard of that one. Well, we can pick one more or less at random. There's a whole big list here. You want to choose, do you want to hear from Joe My God on that one? Why not? Yes, it's got liberal bias, but that should make it more fun to read. Air Force disciplines 15 in classified docs leak scandal. They're just, actually, Joe, it's interesting. The generalized bias, I guess, of Joe My God as a blog is what lands them in the middle here. But all he's done is quote the Washington Post in this, and the Washington Post clearly lands in the centrist 51% on this one. Okay, well, at any rate, in case you were worried about the bias. You don't have to anymore, because all it is a clip from the Washington Post, which reports that 15 people are being disciplined here. After an internal investigation found that lack of supervision and a culture of complacency helped enable a 21-year-old airman to share hundreds of classified documents online in the sprawling leak of U.S. military secrets that rocked the national security establishment this spring. In a report delivered to Congress on Monday, the Air Force blamed Airman First Class Jack D. Tejera's superiors for failing to restrict his access to classified systems and facilities, and to alert appropriate authorities during the time that he was alleged to have been illegally sharing government secrets. Air Force officials said in a statement that the 15 who were disciplined range in rank from staff sergeant to colonel. Air National Guard leaders began the disciplinary proceedings of the process on September 7th, removing some personnel from their positions and filing administrative actions known as non-judicial punishment against others, the service said. And there's a link to the full article in question here. I've got it. We can share that with you as well. But just letting you know that was happening. And I suppose if the colonel involved found his any promotions that he might have been up for delayed for some period of time by Tommy Tuberville, then we can laud Tommy Tuberville as a hero, finally, at last, which is all he ever really wanted. But it doesn't look like he was up for any sort of promotion at the time, and there won't be any forthcoming either. So just wanted to remind you that guy's case was still out there, and he's not alone in facing punishment in all of this, and that's probably as it should be. All right, let's see. Other things to discuss in the last couple minutes of today's show. We're rolling back a little bit in terms of things that have been waiting in the wings. What should it be today? Well, let's read this one just for fun. I saw this morning. I thought this might make an interesting addition to things. Sarah Binder's name is attached to it, along with Alexander Theodoritis, I guess. Thank you. I think we got that one correctly. Theodoritis. The both of them writing together at, what are we looking at? goodauthority.org. How do you like that? I have it. It's from Good Authority. It's on the website Good Authority. I now have it. Well, they have it on Good Authority. I have it on their authority, that this is worth your time. What retired Republican members of Congress really think? My guess here, even without reading the article, is they really think that Congress at the moment is in the hands of lunatics, but they probably thought that while they were members, but felt that they weren't free to say so. Only in very rare cases did they say so, and then they lost their seats. But let's find out what the political science says about this. Their attitudes, it says, are surprisingly different from those of Republican voters and from current Republican lawmakers' positions. Let's see what their methodology is and how they reach that conclusion. This year, the UMass poll, it begins by saying, partnered with the U.S. Association of Former Members of Congress. That's has an abbreviation, FMC, Former Members of Congress. And they have an association as well. And they joined with the UMass poll to probe former lawmakers' views about the performance of Congress, the state of democracy, and more. Good Authority editor Sarah Binder interviewed Alexander Theodoritis, associate professor of political science at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst, and co-director of the UMass poll, to explore these findings. The full survey and results appear here, that is to say, at the end of the link connected to the word here in the article, if you choose to read it. And it's in interview format. Sarah Binder conducting the interview on behalf of Good Authority, again talking to Professor Alexander Theodoritis. Now, Sarah asks, this is such a fascinating survey, she states that part. Tell us a bit about how the partnership with former lawmakers came about and what UMass poll hoped to learn from the collaboration. Well, that's not a question at all. But Professor Theodoritis says this was the product of the serendipity upon which research often depends. A mentor of mine is a former congressman. That is to say, L.F. Payne, formerly a member of Congress as a Democrat representing Virginia from 1988 to 1997. I remember the guy. And Professor Theodoritis says, I interned for him in college and worked for one of his campaigns. He mentioned that he was the current president of the U.S. Association of Former Members of Congress, and a light bulb immediately went off above my head. Well, it went on, actually, but it's interesting that we use it that way. It went off. Well, like a flash bulb goes off. When a flash bulb goes off, when a flash bulb is said to go off, it throws light, it casts light. When a light bulb goes off, it's said to stop casting light. But then in reality, when a flash bulb goes off, it also stops casting. It's when it turns on that okay. But don't mix your metaphors, really, basically, is the lesson here. See also meteoric rise. But never mind all of that. The point is he had an idea. And he suggested that it might be mutually beneficial to conduct a survey of the association's members. They were excited about it because people were talking to them. Because they are in the process of doing some strategic planning, the association, I guess. So I connected with a group of scholars who study Congress and electoral politics and put together an extensive survey. And then, using the FMC's email list and relying on its reputation among former members and a lot of hounding from me, we were able to get nearly 300 former members to take the survey. 293 answered some part of it, and 237 finished the entire survey. My hope going into this was to really serve three overlapping purposes. One, to ask questions of this rare elite sample that will allow me and other scholars to produce academic articles for years to come. Two, to get media attention for the UMass poll and FMC in a way that informs discourse on the topics we talked about. And three, to help the FMC learn more about what their members want. That's not very important to me, but okay. I think these data are well on their way to serving all three goals. So, Sarah says, let's dive in. What do you see as the most important findings? First question of the day. The data we have analyzed and released so far offers the first systematic look at the attitudes and firsthand experiences of former members of Congress. Much of what we find is concerning. We learned a lot about political violence. Nearly half of former members tell us they or their family members received threats during their time in office. And as if that isn't problematic enough, we see that the reported rate of threats is higher for members who served more recently, and especially high for women and people of color. 84% of former members tell us they are concerned about the prospect of violence surrounding the 2024 elections. We asked the former members an open-ended item on the current state of Congress, and they provided almost exclusively negative takes. Dysfunctional, partisan, polarized, divided, and mess were the most commonly used descriptors. More than 80% of former members in this survey believe that the legislative branch has lost power compared to the executive branch, and 65% believe the legislative branch has lost power compared to the judicial branch. We also asked the former members what reforms they think could improve the effectiveness of Congress. 17% talked about reforming the committee system. 11% wanted to see reforms of the filibuster or cloture rules in the Senate. 9% suggested changes to the budgeting or appropriations process, and another 9% suggested rules that would incentivize bipartisanship. We also learned a tremendous amount about the views of former members regarding the 2020 presidential elections, Donald Trump, and the attack on the U.S. Capitol. Those results, especially those of Republican former members, are particularly interesting when compared to the opinions expressed by the mass public in our national polls. And there's some charts available for here, taking a look at how Republican former members of Congress compare to Republican voting population in general. And there are some real departures there. And as Sarah Binder says, just a treasure trove of remarkable data. Another fascinating result was the comparison to the views of general respondents. That's the chart I just told you about. An ongoing UMass poll, rather. Was that your intention all along? And how did you come to draw these comparisons? This is the last of these questions and answers we'll have time for today. Yes, the professor says, the goal from the beginning was to be able to make comparisons on some of these more media-friendly items, especially those related to the 2020 election and the January 6th insurrection. Obviously, how members of this group view those events is relevant for public understanding. I intentionally used some items identical to those that we had asked in early UMass polls on the of the U.S. voting age population at large. Your research, that he has asked, explores the impact of partisan identity and polarization. Do these surveys results surprise you in any way? Well, you can read it for yourself to find out whether they surprise him in any way. I'll give you an example, though, of some of the places where opinions between former members of Congress, Republican former members, and the Republican voting electorate at large, percent saying Biden's election was legitimate. Former members of Congress, Republican former members of Congress, say 82% of them say that Biden's election was legitimate. Among the voting age Republicans at large in America, 26% of current Republican voters say Biden's election was legitimate. They also asked them, what about the percent describing January 6th as a protest versus an insurrection? 74% of current Republican voters say it. 54% of Republican former members of Congress say it was just a protest. 53% of them say it was actually an insurrection. They're actually evenly split there, former members of Congress.
Kagro in the morning with David Waldman.
So that is kind of fascinating. And supposing you wanted some more fascinating things in your life, well, if you were tuned to Netroots Radio and you stayed tuned to Netroots Radio, you would find that there was more to come. Following this show immediately is Justice Putnam's West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And guess what? Why, he has gathered more such fascinating stories for you. Stay tuned and listen in, why don't you? We'll see you tomorrow.